Saving Grandad. When I was just a little lad, I used to sit with my Grandad. In his green eyes on a box he'd say, "Wipe me nose, pull up your socks." Ah, but those were happy days. He used to tell me of old ways, to sow the seeds and make 'em grow, and plant potatoes row by row. But there was one day, he seemed quite sad. He said to me, "Sit down here, my lad." Then he told me about the time he nearly died down in the mine. He told me how many years ago, when times were hard and pay was low, it had been 1918, you see, he then had told this tale to me. He used to work down in the mine, in the dark, the wet, the grime, through long dark tunnels in the damp, the only light a hand-held lamp. He had a pal, his name was Fred, who led the pony known as Ned. A pail of oats, a bed of straw, Ned had never needed any more. But it was one day, down in the hole, the gaffer said, "Go use some coal, we're short of men, so do your most, and on your way check every post." So he'd walked along, with head held low, and with about half a mile to go, and ears straining for the sound that would warn him to turn around. The sound that only miners' ears can raise the hair, arouse such fears. The creaking of a timber post was a sound they feared the most. He'd stopped a while to take a drink, to catch his breath, a while to think. 100 times he'd walked this way. Why was this such a special day? His blood ran cold, he knew not why. Perhaps this is the day I'll die. He laughed out loud, "You stupid mon. Tack up thee pick and get you gone." So on his way by yellow lamp, he trod the aisle through dark and damp. The passageway was getting low, and he knew he had not far to go. Soon he had come upon a tub, and he had known he'd reached the hub, where the passage split in four, room for one man in each, no more. On bending knees he'd crawled into the hole, and with his pick struck at the coal. Then he had heard that fearful sound, a screeching crack, then rocks fell down. All had gone still, the dust was dense, his eyes went wide, his muscles tense. He'd known he could be there to stay, they wouldn't get him out that day. As the dust began to settle, he'd known that day would test his mettle. The lamp had flickered nearby, he'd crawled to it, prepared to die. It could be days he had to wait, and how he wished he'd had his mate. For hours he'd laid there in the damp, in agony from cold and cramp. He could not suppress a moan because of pain and being alone. The air by then was getting thick, and he'd begun to feel quite sick. Then something made him realize the lack of air would be his demise. The yellow flame upon the wick would change quite soon if they weren't quick. Then it dawned on him this was no game, and quickly he'd put out the flame. He'd waited in the dark and cold and prayed to God that he'd grow old. It was a day and a half he'd lain. He dreamt he'd heard the sound of rain, but again all had gone still. And then, oh yes, it was a drill. Racked with pain, he'd come around, had tried to move, to make a sound. His voice was hoarse, his body weak. He'd found that he could hardly speak. Slowly, as the drill drew near, he'd started thinking of cold beer, of food, a smoke, a soft warm bed. All these things went through his head. And then had come a blinding light, and slowly he'd regained his sight. The first man in was his mate Fred. Behind him was the pony, Ned. Fred and his pony, all alone, had filled and pulled the tubs with stone to clear away with sweat they had, saved the life of my Grandad. After they had pulled him clear, he'd realized that life was dear. Many men had died, you see. At least that's what Grandad had told me. Thank God that coal has had its day. There are better ways to earn our pay, and one day, when the mines have gone, there'll be no pit deaths from then on.